When I experience an obstacle or challenge, I'm going to move past it. I'm going to shatter that glass ceiling and I'm going to keep going.
It hurts to smash a glass ceiling.
Wow, we literally have to be superheroes to walk through this life.
While I might have been the first, I pray that I'm not the last.
Hello, hello. Good evening. It's 5 o'clock on Pacific Standard Time. I'm in Cleveland tonight, and I am going to be hosting this show with Dr. Tracy Adams. Solo tonight. Joshua was unable to make it, but I hope it will continue to be a great show. Tracy Adams is an incredible expert on emotional intelligence, and I have known her after taking her workshop a couple years ago, and so I'm really excited to introduce her to you. But as you know, at Taking Her Lead, our goal is to share the stories of women in leadership and how their passion and purpose have allowed them to thrive. So without further ado, I'd love to bring on Dr. Tracy Adams.
Hello.
Hi, Tracy. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about where you are. You're in the Pacific Northwest. So tell us how your day is going.
I am. Oh, it's a crazy Monday. Mondays can be a little bit crazy around here. I'm in Portland, Oregon. It's a beautiful, beautiful sunny summer day, which, you know, in Northwest fashion, we get really intense summers and then it gets gray and cloudy, and then we don't see our neighbors for 9 months. So it's a good day to be in Portland today for sure.
Yay.
Yes.
Well, you know, I can't wait for our listeners to hear your story, because I think that I was at a workshop. It was in Portland, in the Haunted Asylum, wherever that is. What's the name of that place? That's what I remember.
Yes. You remember it was the haunted, it was the poorhouse. It was a poorhouse. Yeah.
Yeah. And I loved it. And it was such a great workshop. I don't even remember how many years ago that was, probably 3 or 4.
It was a while ago. Yeah.
I've been a big fan ever since. And I know many of our listeners tonight have heard me talk about you. So I'm hoping that they'll chime in on the comments and ask you questions. But tell people a little bit about you and how you came to be doing what you're doing and how you describe your work.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a practitioner of emotional intelligence, and I'm uber credentialed. I want all of the listeners to know that I have so many credentials behind my name, and yet right? That's such an outward thing to say, because on the inside, I sometimes feel 8 years old, and I have the same brain wiring as anybody else. And, you know, my work really is about facilitating your mind to make better and braver choices. And I came into this work because I've been in corporate America almost 30 years. I've worked my way up, started as a Clinique salesperson when I was 18 years old. And I worked my way up in corporate America. And those are hard systems to navigate as women, right? What I always say, if you want to know our history in the workplace, is just watch the TV show Mad Men. I love that show. Not only do I love like the cinematography and the writing and the costuming, but I love like the narrative of women not having this long runway in corporate America, right? We've come to the party late. We didn't make up the rules. The rules were made up by the male mindset, and we're just trying to figure out how it goes. And we're certainly bringing diversity into the space in workplaces, but it's a long, hard road. And my work really is about helping women thrive in those structures. So that's what I do.
Yes. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how you got into this, right?
Yes.
How that evolved.
Yes.
And I know a couple stories that I'm hoping you're going to tell, but I'm afraid to mention them because you might tell new ones and I don't want to miss them.
I have so many of them.
So one of the things I want to ask you is, what childhood, if you can think about some childhood experience or some pattern that evolved in your childhood that kind of brought you where you are today, doing the work that you're doing, what awareness do you have of your upbringing and how that impacted you?
Well, I want you all to know that I was raised in the 70s. And so I was raised by hippie parents. My dad was a hippie. And so there were a lot of naked people around growing up, no boundaries, a lot of free love, no bedtime rules. And then my mom, my mom was a single mom. My mom was a prison guard, and she packed a weapon, and she was a really tough cookie. And so I have this personality now where I have a blend of both. My hippie free spiritness is certainly within me. And I also have this tough, when I do my strengths finders, I have command as one of my top 5 strengths. And when I was little, I used to get feedback that I was really bossy. Now, they tell girls that they're bossy. They don't say, wow, Tracy, you got such great leadership qualities. But I am very commanding. I'm the woman who will make a decision when a decision needs to be made. I like to move work forward. I also work in corporations in addition to the emotional intelligence work that I do. So I feel like my upbringing was just a beautiful marriage of make it fun, make it light. Let's be on the fly. Let's be really agile, like my hippie dad would be. Let's talk it out. Let's hug it out. And then my mom, who packed a weapon, who you didn't mess around with my mother. Like you just didn't, even today, you just don't mess around with my mother. I have a little bit of her in me as well. So
well,
I have to learn all that.
I have a question about that.
Yes.
So if little girl bossy Tracy, how does that show up in I would assume that's a little intimidating for some of your peers or some of your bosses. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's an interesting thing because part of how I got into emotional intelligence was I was not promotable because of that nature, because I was the woman that had the voice in the room and I had to point out the things that weren't working. And I was the one, I have a futuristic mind. So I would be pointing out things that could impact the organization that no one else was talking about. And that, in my generation, and I think in many, it's looked upon as, squeaky wheel or, so I could not get promoted. And that's how I found EQ. I was grateful enough to have a boss who understood that political dynamic and handed me the book, Emotional Intelligence. And so I've had to learn in my career when to open my mouth and sometimes when to say nothing. And that I think is the mark of a really good leader, is someone who knows the political landscape, that sometimes you don't step into your power. Sometimes you let other people step into their power and you step back and let other people shine, which it's hard for people to do that are very extroverted and verbal articulators like I am.
Yeah. So I have a quick question for you just to set the context. I think most people know what the Daniel Goleman definition of emotional intelligence is. At managing your emotions and being in relationship with others. But if you had to have a working definition of a quick and dirty line of what is emotional intelligence and what would it do for you, what would you say that is?
Yeah, the way I define it, the way I look at it, it's managing your mind, but your mind has 3 different systems working in any given time when you're awake, right? It's your thinking brain, your feeling brain, and your action brain. So basically, it's your ability to clearly articulate your thoughts, feelings, and wants. Right? Do I have the ability to clearly articulate those things? Because when I'm hijacked, the middle side of my brain, my limbic system, the blood leaves my neocortex. I can't think clearly and I end up making poor decisions. And those decisions could be the email that I send that I shouldn't have sent, or the chocolate ice cream that I devoured because I was so stressed and I didn't know how to self-regulate, to yelling at my children when they don't do what I want. Like there's reactions that I have to stimulus that my brain will react to unless I slow down and let those processes catch up. It is a cognitive structure. So emotional intelligence gets a really bad rap in the workplace because we think it's about hugging each other and singing kumbaya and walking around feeling sad and let's talk about our
crying
feelings.
At work,
crying at work, which is all part of really good EQ is allowing those emotions, but the underpinning of that is about how you control them and manage them. And what I've been discovering about myself too is having the foresight of a behavior that I know will bring me bad emotion if I do that behavior. Like that's advanced EQ, is being predictive in my behavior, so that I can make better choices. And when I talk with the women that I coach, I talk about better choices and braver choices.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that really helps set the stage for what we're talking about today.
Yes.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you is I know the story of that boss who was to me, it's kindness when people give you feedback and hold the mirror very steady for you.
Yes.
And getting the better thing to do is getting really good at asking for it. Right.
Yes.
And so my question is, before that even happened, if you were a teenager, young adult, are there any pivotal moments that told you, I'm going into corporate America, I'm going into HR, I'm going into emotional intelligence? Are there actual personal experiences that you had that now in retrospect you see, oh, that was a big moment in my life? You know, when I was in the 4th grade, I, voted for the other person that was running for the student council, and she won by 1 vote, my vote, right? Yeah, right. And so you learn, like, is there anything like that you can say, wow, I look back at that and I go, that was a life-changing moment. College.
God, there's so many too. There's so many. And the beautiful thing about my life up to this point, and I do feel like I'm an optimist. I also have a lot of natural dopamine in my brain. So I just tend to look at the world in a very optimistic point. Someone introduced me once as the happiest person he knows, which sort of put me back a little bit because, I don't consider myself happy per se. I'm just optimistic about things. I was a natural performer when I was young. I would stage plays, and I should have been the director. I really was like the director, the actress, the producer, the costumer. I would rally all the kids together and we would do productions and plays. I was also a dancer when I was young. So I danced with a lot of companies when I was younger and did a lot of musical theater. And so creative expression came very easy to me. And then when I went to college and got a degree in dance and theater, I sat there going, what am I going to do? Oh, and philosophy, by the way, I got also a degree in philosophy. I was like, what am I going to do with this? So I ended up getting a degree in instructional adult learning theory, corporate education, adult learning theory. And then, of course, later in my career, I would get an emotional intelligence degree in that, my study around that. And so I have found that like everything in my life has just culminated into this amazing adventure that I'm on around teaching women how to do those things, how to express themselves creatively, how to set really good boundaries, how to say what they mean and mean what they say. Like I have the best job ever. And I do think it's because of all the pain I went through. I was a practicing alcoholic at 13, drinking and smoking pot and sneaking out of the house. I mean, I was like a rebel without a cause when I was young, and then got sober at 27. And my life took off. Like my life took off really in that pivotal moment when I realized, oh my God, I'm self-regulating through, and not just alcohol. I mean, addiction really is about self-regulation. Like Brene Brown talks a lot about taking the edge off. Like what are the things that we're doing in our life to take the edge off? And for me at 28, it was alcohol. But then later I would learn like it was shopping and working, and my phone is another thing I have to be careful of. I mean, I can't even watch a movie anymore without my phone. I was at the movie theater the other day and I turned to my son and I said, where's the stop button? Like where I just wanted to find out how much time we had left in the movie. And I mean, I don't even watch a movie from start to finish anymore because I've trained my brain to, short stops and regulation. It's all about regulation. So I think, I went around and around on that question. What a great question. Yeah. But really, I can just see the whole path laid out before me, from everything, all the pain, all the anguish, all the drama in my life has brought me to this point, and it all makes the experience so much richer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it allows you to see people differently because you've experienced it yourself, right?
Yes.
I mean,
oh, for sure.
That's that whole feeling of creating an ambiance where people feel seen and heard. And I really think in your workshops, you're the master at that. Like you.
Oh, and it's, the
create
other
a
thing I
container
love
for that.
It's so true, isn't it? Like those containers that we create because we've been there. That's what empathy, I think, is about, is that we might not have been in that exact experience, but the more we learn how to embrace our own journeys, the more we can honor someone else's, which is, another form of self-regulation, because our brains are connected and we get hijacked by each other. And if I'm in a relationship with you and you're upset about something, my brain is going to get upset. And I'm not going to be able to hold a space for you because I'm going to make it about me. So it's always work.
Right.
It's always work.
It is always work.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question that I have is, who mentored you? Who influenced you? Who influences you today? Like that you like to read their work, or you
I love that
mentoring. Like who does that for you?
Well, I'm going to give a little bit of credit to my mother. Again, I go back to the prison guard thing. She was, my mom was really tough, and I'm always even still grateful that she's a very big strength in my life. So, my mom, of course, when I was younger, but then I had some amazing teachers and faculty. I was that kid that was so curious. I was so curious. So having coaches, I've had coaches. I just think the coaching profession is so important. I've been in HR my entire career, and I've always hired coaches for executives, and I've seen transformational work when people are being coached. There's something really powerful about the coaching relationship when you defer your own learning and decision-making over to someone else. And I don't mean that as a learned helplessness thing.
Right.
I'm meaning that you're so curious about a different perspective that it causes you to behave in a different way. Those have been impactful. And I have like a list of 5 women coaches that I still call today. The work that I'm reading, it's interesting. I'm a big fan of James Clear, Atomic Habits, which is about how you behave and how those structures that you have to put in place to change your behavior. A lot of those are self-regulation structures. So I love James Clear. And I love Tim Ferriss. I love human productivity reading. But I want to say what I'm reading today is Twyla Tharp. And I'm reading Twyla Tharp now because as a woman, as I'm coming into, I'm in my 50s now, and I got really connected to this idea that there's an older, wiser woman inside of me. And she's in my brain, and she's dying to mentor me. And she's always the calm presence in my own mind, this older, wiser woman. And I was at a bookstore recently, and I saw Twyla Tharp's book, and I used to be a dancer. So it was bittersweet. It's like super sweet that I would see her and also be rumbling with my own age, maturity, right? My children are moving out, so I'm now coming into a new stage of life. And the reason I love her book so much, it's, just keep moving. That's her whole premise, is that age is a mindset. It's just a mindset. And we were talking before the session about women in particular. We slow ourselves down with our mindsets around our hair color, the color lipstick, what we're wearing, my nails. Like I have to now go and get my nails done. Like I slow myself down around achieving the things I want to achieve in my life because of this beauty bondage. And so reading her book just makes me recognize yet again that everything that goes on in my mind can be changed.
Right.
All the stories I make up about who I am and my identity can be changed.
Yes. And that just takes a lot of self-reflection to say, is this linking up? Like,
yes.
If you're aware enough to go, why am I getting these eyelashes? Or why am I putting this on? Like, tell me more about how this lines up with the authentic internal me, right? I don't have anything wrong with people who want to look good.
For sure.
Of course. It's pride, but I agree with you. There's a lot of like nuancy things that's going to be different for everybody.
And it's the difference between showing up to that beauty with anxiety or showing up with excitement. You know, like if I'm excited about getting my hair color, and because I do, I mean, look at my hair. I've got all kinds of colors in my hair right now, and I have fun with my lipstick, and I really do. I have fun with the rituals of making myself look different, but I do it out of fun and not anxiety. And there were days where I would have anxiety, like, oh my God, I have a huge presentation tomorrow and I've got all this gray coming in. And that's a horrible shame spiral that I just don't want to go down.
Wow, that's powerful, differentiating that. Very powerful. Thank you for that.
Yes.
I do have another question about atomic habits. And what atomic habits have you put into place after reading his book? I read his book too. I think it's really good.
Love his work. I have to read it over and over again because here's the thing about my mind. I am not a slow learner. I'm a fast forgetter. I read stuff and then like 3 months later, I'm like, dang, didn't I just read that?
Okay, I got to write that down.
The power
I'm
of
not
his
a slow
work.
learner. I'm a fast
I
forgetter.
know, right?
Yes. I love it.
Forgetter. Yeah. So, but the powerful thing I remember about his work is putting cues, like having cues lined up of things that you want to do. Like if I'm going to work out, I'll set my workout stuff on my bed before I go to bed. Like those little things really help. But the thing that rocked my world, and it is my philosophy around emotional intelligence and development, is you have to pick your friends wisely. You know, one of my favorite money guys is Dave Ramsey. I've been following Dave's work for a long time. He's the no debt guy. And he always talks about this idea that you'll only be 10% richer than the people you hang out with. And it's a metaphor, really. This isn't a conversation about money, but it is about whoever you hang out with, you're going to adopt those behaviors. And so I coach a lot of the women that come through my courses, and I create this in my community of powerful women that come together because we're practicing and we're supporting each other in these new habits, which are really hard. And I'll say the evidence, like Gallup does a ton of research around habits forming and how community shapes your behavior. You know, we come from family systems, we leave our family systems, and we take those behaviors with us unless there is a huge pivotal intervention that happens to change the way we view ourselves. And sometimes if we don't have that, it's joining groups, support groups, masterminds. I mean, he has a whole list of them, but it really makes a difference who you hang out with.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so would you say that the people that you've hung out with over the course of your life have changed in the kind of characteristics they have?
Yes. Oh, I used to hang out
with a little bit more about
drinkers and smokers.
Yeah.
It was like in my early 20s. If you weren't a drinker and a smoker, I didn't want to have anything to do with you. So I've come a long way, baby.
Yeah.
You know, and this goes back to this like setting boundaries. Like you know, I always say to people, women I coach, like, how do you feel when you leave the presence of that person? Right? Like friends that, you know, in a lot of my workshops, I'll talk about those emotional vampires that we have in our lives that just drain our energy. And there almost has to be like a weeding process that goes on in our lives in order for us to live healthy and happy. There's relationships in your life that no longer serve you. And as women, it's really hard for us to let go of those. Right? Where we're caretakers and some of us are codependent about not hurting people's feelings. But I mean, I recently joined a millionaire mastermind group with 7 other women who are also millionaires. And to sit around a table, it's a Zoom table, but to sit around a table and talk to women openly about money and the stock market and what we make and what we are doing with our money. In my family, we never would have had those conversations. We never would have had those conversations. And so it's finding your tribe. There's a whole workshop that I do in one of my labs about your board of directors and purposely and intentionally picking out powerful women that you can hang out with. And it's so funny because a lot of us in this mastermind, we don't feel worthy of each other. It's so funny. Like we all sit there going, oh my God, I can't believe you're my friend. And she'll say, oh my God, I can't believe you're my friend. So we have that as women, that imposter syndrome all the time. And so You just
learning
weed
to
people
manage
out.
that. Yeah. And so I think that as you kind of figure this out, and, if Dave Ramsey says you take on the characteristics of the people around you, right?
Yes.
I find, at least in healthcare, we're a lot of givers. And so we attract a lot of takers. And really the healthiest people in the world are givers and takers, and they want to be able to give back. And they're not interested in you if they can never give back, right? So your healthy people give and take.
And the key to the give and take is making sure that your cup is full first. Right. We give from the overflow. And that's, again, my work around well-being and emotional intelligence, setting good boundaries, saying no to things when they don't serve you. That's a brave conversation so that you have room enough to give to other people. Right. Like you have enough space to give because you're giving from the overflow.
Well, and I do want to say that I know you have a million other commitments and you have the ability to say no. So I'm really delighted that you said yes to this. It really meant a lot to me. So thank you for coming
I adore
on.
You. You're doing some great work. You are doing just world changing.
Yep. We've got to, we all have to do our part.
Yes.
So a couple other questions is, I'm wondering how your approach to conflict has changed. In healthcare, I tell people all the time, how do you get your voice in the room? How do you cultivate your point of view and say it? And I think that's the biggest challenge we have in conflict is sometimes we don't want to hurt people. So tell me a little bit about how your approach to conflict has changed over the years and with your education and growth and that kind of stuff.
I think one of the most powerful tools I teach is the EQ awareness wheel. And it's 5 components about what happens in your brain in any conflict. Now, if we're just calm, there's no reason to go through that tool if you and I are just, having a great time. But as soon as there's like a difference of opinion or a diverse thought, or we rub each other the wrong way, then something happens in our brain. We get hijacked. And so this tool is about what I'm noticing that's happening, what my story is about what I'm noticing, what feeling is being generated because what I'm noticing is generating a certain feeling, and what am I wanting? And so I guide women through that tool. And the insight for me is often conflict is just a story I'm making up in my head. And the more intense the conflict is, it's about my past, right? When it's hysterical, it's historical. Because those brain patterns have already been set forth, and there are things that there's like a woman at work that I go from 0 to 10 with this woman at work because she reminds me of someone from my childhood. It's not even about her. It's not even about the current relationship.
And she doesn't even know she's tapping on that.
She has no idea. She has no idea. She reminds me of someone in my childhood. And it's not the person from my childhood. And so going through that awareness wheel and unpacking within my own mind, okay, what story am I making up about her? First of all, what am I noticing that's happening? So if let's say she cuts me off in a meeting, we're both presenting together and she takes my PowerPoint slide and she ends up doing my part and she cuts me off. That's something I noticed, right? I can see that behavior. And once I see that behavior, I start making up a story about it. And that story could be, wow, she didn't mean to do that. She was probably in her zone doing her thing, and she probably didn't intend to do that. That's one story. But if she reminds me of my stepmother or something, the story is she's grandstanding, she's out to get me, she wants my job. And then all these chemicals start flowing in my body, and I can't have a courageous conversation because now I'm flooded and I'm angry. So unpacking that story is the first part of really good conflict resolution, is taking that pause before I react and then saying, okay, this is a story I'm making up. And then once I'm clear about that, I can lean into a conversation and say, hey, Jill, I noticed in that presentation that you took the slides that were allocated to me. I'm totally making up a story that you didn't mean to do that. I'm feeling a little perplexed by that. And I'm wondering what happened. That's my want, by the way. My want is I want her to explain what happened.
Well, I think that there's in that too, and tell me what you think about this. This is also unwinding the story about the person in your history. Because a lot of times you attach some big story to that person.
Oh my God.
And you meet them a year or two later and you go, why did I feel that way about them?
All
Like,
the time.
What's the deal here? Right.
All the time.
Like,
oh my gosh.
There's the story there too, right?
Blow my mind. Yeah. Blow my mind right now.
Yeah.
So I mentioned I'm creating a new course, the dating with emotional intelligence, and dating I think is the most painful practice that we could have in our brains because there's so much emotional trauma that comes up about caregivers.
Yeah.
You know,
and
whether
rejection,
the rejection,
yeah.
emotional availability, emotional neglect. Everything's online now, so everything's a text, and so you're making up stories all the time. Does he like me? Does he not like me? Is he ghosting me? Like, what happened there? So it's we're in laboratories all the time.
Right. Well, the funny thing is no matter who we're dating or looking at, they're paying for all of our past relationship failures, right? Like all the stories we've created and accumulated and hardwired or superhighwayed in our head, they're going to pay for.
It's so true.
I was single until I was 50. I get that.
You know, there's a new tool that I've created that I love. When you came through the workshop, I didn't have this tool yet, but it is an intimacy tool. It's a tool about building intimacy. And if you can imagine a funnel with the top of the funnel being really light green and the bottom of the funnel being really dark green, when you think about the start of any relationship, whether it's a coworker or a romance, you're always in the light green and you're always talking about the weather and what did you do over the weekend and how are you? It's very safe. And over time, you start to pull each other into the funnel and the color gets darker green and then it gets darker green. And then and when you're really vulnerable with each other, it gets really, really dark. And the thing about that funnel is everyone's in a different level at a different time. So I can approach you already in the dark green and want to ask you all these personal questions, like when you're dating on that first date and someone discloses all kinds of stuff in the dark green and the other person's in the light green going, what the heck is this? We're like, right? Yeah. It's the same with leadership and it's the same with team development. You know, it takes time for teams to build that natural intimacy. So I always say in my workshops, we're going to go into the dark green right now. And it's a metaphor of be open, be vulnerable. It's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to hurt a little bit. And those of you who are parents out there, you'll understand. I have a 21-year-old son. He lives in the light green. And I can't take it personally that that's where he's safe.
Right.
So when you talk about conflict, sometimes conflict is that one person's in the light green, one's in the dark. I'm trying to pull him in and he's getting mad. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So intimacy takes time. It takes courage. It takes communication skills.
And so I think that's true. You're talking in the language of almost everybody that you encounter. There are going to be at different levels of comfortable intimacy, vulnerability, however you want to phrase it. Do you find that there's any differences between men and women? Have you found any about where they start, or is it all just your nurturing and your nature that kind of get you your natural inclination there?
I mean, I can have a bias. I can have a bias that women would go, I will say this is what I know. And the research would support this. When women have conflict, they tend to, like, men will fight or flight. Women will tend to befriend. Meaning when we're in conflict, we tend to talk it out with each other. I get in groups of women. I call my women friends. I mean, every Saturday morning, we have breakfast together and we vent. That's what we do as women. We vent. Men, they're fight or flight. They can get over things much easier. Their brains aren't wired with so much complexity. It's not that they're shallow. They just, it just washes through their brain a little bit different than women. I will say in my dating journey, though, I've had men that got too green within themselves and then shot right out and like took off. Right. That's their flight. is,
Oh,
hey,
yeah.
this is getting a little bit too intense for me and I'm not comfortable here. I'm out of here. And I'm just sort of sitting there going, hey, what happened? I thought we were having a great time.
Right. Well, you know, Brene Brown calls that the vulnerability hangover.
Oh,
It's
right.
sort of like, oh my gosh, I told you too much and now I have to like ghost you, right? Because you know me now. Right.
I call it compulsive disclosure, right? Like when you have a date with someone and you tell them all your dirty, dark secrets, it's really, it's a self-regulating strategy around abandonment. Like if I tell you everything about me and you're still with me, then I won't risk losing you.
So Tracy, I have to tell you this. I think the best place to practice that is on the airplane. Because they have to stay with you no matter what you tell them. They have to sit next to you until you arrive, right? So you get all kinds of like, okay, people get really polite and very accepting.
Oh my God.
They have another hour with you, right?
And that, my friend, is why I always pick the aisle seat. Like I totally figured it out. I'm like an aisle seat person because of that.
Right? Yep.
Yeah.
So, oh, excuse me, I have to go to the restroom, right?
That's right. That's right.
So, think about your younger self, your 28-year-old self, 29-year-old self. Like you're just coming out your you know, kind of wild days and you're figuring it out. What advice would you give your younger self now that you know what you know? What would you say to her?
Oh, I would just hold her. And I'd say, honey, get ready for a really wild ride. You know, like we had a lab last week. I have about 17 women in this lab and we all come in and out at different times. And our topic last week was around regret. And every time I'm asked that question, I always think that somehow my 28-year-old self is going to need to know something so that she doesn't make the same mistake. And I think all my mistakes, although as painful as they are, they bring me such depth. Like I feel like now at 53, I have more depth in my soul than I've ever had because I've done some pretty bad things. You know, Brene Brown calls it rising strong. You know, that getting into that swamp and really going deep. I love that work. I do. I love that work. And so what I would say to my 28-year-old self is don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of that. And the other thing, ladies, I do not mean to make it about this, but you know, I didn't discover my true sexuality until I was in my 40s. And I won't give you resources right now. You can come through my workshops because I do talk about all kinds of body parts in my own workshops. But that's the other thing I would tell my 28-year-old self is explore your body, know your body, be able to articulate to someone else what your body likes, and don't be ashamed of your body.
Well, and that kind of goes with the beauty thing too, right? It's that comfort level of this is who I am, right?
Oh, I was talking to my you asked about mentorship. I have a 72-year-old mentor who I was talking to her the other day and I was saying, God, I'm 53. I hope I can still have sex when I'm older. And she goes, oh, honey, it's so good in your 70s. And like, ladies, we need to be saying that because where do you say that? And how do you know that?
Right.
I wouldn't know that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I
That's
would never
true.
know that.
We don't talk like that. You know?
We don't in the corporation. We don't talk like that in the corporation.
Ladies
but in my
don't
workshops,
talk like that.
You know, in my workshops, you know, it's funny. I did a new brand. I hired a woman to do my new brand. So my business name is ThriveOn. And she gave me like 5 different things to choose from, and I loved what she came up with. The color was black and red, and I loved it. The whole Thrive On is black, but the V was red, and I'm like, what? Why is the V red? Is that a mistake? I think it's a typo. And she goes, no, V's for vagina. Yeah, she's like power of the vagina, and I was like, oh my God, you got to keep that. Like I won't publish that. I'm not going to publish that anywhere. Yeah. But someday when I'm brave enough, ladies, and I do work for a corporation. I would never like say this in front of any of my corporate executives that I work with, but that's what it stands for. Is like, yes.
So you're just going to say when someone asks you vroom vroom or
right. Oh my gosh. Great. That's the best.
Do you think that women have unique qualities in leadership that men don't have, or do they bring something different to the table, or is it all just a matter of cultivating it?
Yes. No, I think the book, The Female Brain is a must read by any woman, If you're raising a daughter or if you're a woman, you need to read The Female Brain. And if you're a man and you don't understand your wife or your daughter, you need to read The Female Brain. It's so fascinating how our brains are wired. We're wired for multitasking. We're wired not only just for taking care of our offspring, but we're wired to do a lot of different things at the same time for survival. And so when you think about, the blessing and the curse of having our brains in the corporation, we get a lot of stuff done. We do it through relationships. We navigate relationships. The research says that women don't necessarily honor the hierarchy all the time. We can network. We can work in matrix organizations far better because of the way our brain is wired. The problem with our brain wiring is we will tend to take on too much that isn't ours. Like 9 times out of 10, the women that come to me wired and tired, wired on caffeine and tired because they're doing so much, is because they take on stray dogs and they take on work because no one else is doing it and they can do it better. So again, it goes back to those boundaries, right? As leaders, I'm constantly, one of the brave conversations I teach women is how to have an alignment conversation with your boss. And the way that looks is, and I've had to have them, where I will go in with my list of 20 things in my department that my function's leading, and I'll say to my boss, "Hey boss, I've taken the privilege or the work of prioritizing these 20 things. These are the top 3 things that I need to deliver this year. Are you in agreement?" Because as women, we don't have those conversations. We just keep saying, yes, I can do it. Yes, I'll figure it out. And plates get spun and we're trying to raise kids and it's a mess. And so brave conversations, I think part of being a good woman leader and a male leader, men and women, is to have those kinds of conversations.
Right. Well, and then the other thing is if they're not prioritized for you and you're guessing and you're never clarifying them, you're not meeting the deliverables at the end of the day, because people go, that's not what I wanted, or that wasn't the top priority, right?
It's true.
It is true. So, we talked about what you're currently listening to, but I was wondering, one of the things that I think that you've kind of mastered, and maybe that's in your workshops, but I really feel like you've mastered self-compassion. Like, how to normalize things and not hold yourself to such a stringent perfectionist bar that you can't meet. You really talk kindly to women, and I would imagine to be able to do that, you have to talk kindly to yourself. Can you talk a little bit about your journey around self-compassion?
Well, first of all, I had to take a whiteboard marker in red on my bathroom window mirror once and just write, "I love you." I had to do that. Because it is a practice, and it's a practice I do all the time. I mean, every time I'm naked in front of the mirror, that all my EQ training goes out the window, because I start to look at my body and like, oh, I wish I didn't have that. And, oh, I need to get to the gym. And I mean, all that stuff comes into my head and I can't help it. It's identifying when that voice kicks in and then countering that voice. One of my favorite books is The Beauty Myth. I think her last name's Wolf. Naomi Wolf, I think, is her name, The Beauty Myth. And just how, we're trained as women, and it's a multi-billion-dollar machine to get us to believe that we're not thin enough and we're not young enough and our hair color isn't shiny enough. And I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar machine that gets us to think this way. And so we're constantly fighting imagery and culture around who we think we are. Right? My mother used to say that to me when I was young. Who do you think you are?
You are. Yeah, I had a mom like that
now.
Too.
I mean, I want to say to my 73-year-old mother, I know who I am now, Mom. Right? I didn't then, but I do now. But you're constantly cultivating that relationship. I was telling a friend just recently, I used to suffer from a horrible eating a dysfunction, eating disorder, food addiction, however you want to term it. And I used to eat behind my back. Like that. I mean, I would binge at night and then I'd throw it all away and pretend that it never happened the next day. Like as if I was kidding anybody.
Right.
But it's a metaphor of the relationship I have with myself, like all the promises that I make to myself, all the commitments that I break to myself, the times I say yes to someone when I meant no, the times I've been in, sexual situations where I didn't want something, but I said yes. I mean, the whole Me Too movement, I mean, we're still having dialogues, not enough of them, about what the whole Me Too movement means. Our part in that equation, how many times I said yes to things when I meant no, and I did not have the voice to say no.
Right.
All of that is about the relationship I have with myself.
Yeah, it's about cultivating self-trust, right? To be able to trust yourself, to stay true in your integrity and your authenticity. And it's hard with all those pressures. And it's really like, and so how do you recover from those kinds of things? Like the self-compassion around failures, not just body image, but failures.
I go back to my women, my board of directors, like I had a failure last week. I'm on this dating adventure. I had this failure last week, and I went paddleboarding. I go paddleboarding every other weekend with my tribe, my girl tribe. And they're the ones that remind me of who I am. And that's why I'm saying pick friends that can remind you who you are. Because you're going to forget. You're going to forget who you are.
Right. And they're the people that can see you and mirror that back for you when you forget who you are. Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Or it's too painful. Yep.
Yes.
I get it. Yes. So the other thing I wanted to ask you is about self-care. Like, do you have a ritual that you do that you just say, this is my boundary. I do this ritual. This is how I take care of myself. I do this every day. I mean, it sounds like you have a couple of them, and meeting with your friends on Saturday morning. You can say, hey, I meet with my tribe on Saturday morning. Are there any personal things that you do that ground you, that give you that unshakable faith that I will be able to get through this complex moment? Is there anything like that?
I'm an aspiring meditator. When I meditate, it's so good for your brain to do that. And you do not have to follow anything. You can just set your timer for 15 minutes and sit in a chair and close your eyes. And that's enough to change your brain waves. So I do that every morning as I go to the same chair. James Clear is all about the sameness, like creating those routines. I go to the same chair every morning. I set my timer. I do 30 minutes now. I used to do 15. I can get up to 30 minutes now. And I just let my mind rest. And it rewires itself. I have such better days when I can spend that quiet time just letting my mind take a break, right? It's in a whole different wavelength. I hate exercise. I'm not a fan of exercise. I do not like exercise. I wish I liked exercise, but I have, during COVID, I found kickboxing and I loved it. I loved it. I used to be a dancer and I spent my whole life in dance clothes and dance studios. But I loved kickboxing, and then the studio closed, and I recently took up spin classes and cycling. I go every day, which is, again, a crazy thing because I'm not an exerciser. See, that's my own identity talking, right? But it's my own identity coming out. That's not true.
Yeah. Your self-limiting belief, right? I'm not an exerciser, right?
I'm not an exerciser, but I love going to spin class because it's like so meditative. I just spin. I don't think. I just spin, and then this great creative energy comes to my mind when I'm spinning. So that's a part of it. The other part I will say, and I'll go back to this, self-care is tending your garden. It's looking at your calendar. It's knowing what you say yes to. It's setting really good boundaries. I turn my phone off at 9:00 at night. I don't take calls after 9:00 at night. I don't watch the news. That's part of self-care. I got all wrapped up in last election, and I had so much cortisol in my bloodstream that I just couldn't do that to my body anymore. And so I don't watch the news. And you'll have to I tell my girlfriends, if the end of the world is coming, then call me. Like that's what you do. If something is like,
pick up the phone.
Pick up the phone and call me if a fire is coming or I need to, it's doomsday is here. And I come from a family that if you go into my parents' house, they have a TV on CNN in every room. Like they're like news junkies. And I come from that kind of family that you're not with it unless you know what's going on in the news. So I'm countercultural there. The other piece that I love, in addition to all that, is just recently, a year ago on Independence Day, I stopped drinking caffeine. And I didn't know. I did not know at the time what that drug was doing to my emotional intelligence. I did not know. I knew that every morning I needed it to feel better. And I knew that I had to set my coffee pot. There was something about hearing the coffee pot in the morning that just made me feel better. Like I felt like I felt like my job was going to be better and my personality was going to be better. And I had all these ideas about who I was on caffeine. And what happened was my gut stopped enjoying it. Every time I would drink it or I would eat something, my gut would hurt, and I was going in for tests. And am I allergic? It was all about the coffee and all about the caffeine. So I stopped drinking it, and then about 2 months into that detox, I realized how much my emotional life changed. Like the lows got high and the highs got low, and now I'm just even keel all day long. I don't react like I used to. I am the same person. I am still excitable and exciting, and I'm a good teacher. And I thought that I would need caffeine the rest of my life to be that kind of person. And so another myth of self-care that somehow I needed that drug.
So one of the things that I know about you, because it was kind of the first time I really dove into thinking about this, is I remember in your workshop talking about manifesting who you wanted to become and what you were wanting for yourself, and you writing yourself a check, and that story. And I kind of want you to share that, because I think we have a lot of power in what we think, and on the positive side, not just on the negative side of stop saying that to yourself, stop telling yourself negative stories, but there's positive ones to tell. Can you share with our listeners that story?
I have so many manifestation stories. So part of what you did in my workshop is on the very last day, we do a vision board. And I'm a big fan. I don't even know, like the neuroscience of vision boards always blow my mind, because I'm a scientist by training. Like I understand how the brain works, and I understand how visualization works. But the crazy thing about vision boards is there have been times in my life where I'll put a picture on there and I won't understand what the picture is. But then a year goes by and I realize, oh my God, that very same picture just manifests. Like, for example, I had a picture on one of my vision boards last year of a painter. It was a female painter. She was painting. And one of the women that now I'm really connected with in my millionaire mastermind owns a painting company. And she's one of my best friends. I've been friends with her now for 2 years. So this must have been 2 years ago. But I look at that picture of this woman painter and I'm like, where did that come from? Like, how did I know that my life was going to be drastically changed by a female painter? And how the heck did it come on my vision board?
Wow.
Like, to see that connection.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that have happened. And I think in that case, the example that I gave in that workshop then about the check, if I can remember, was about my limited beliefs about money. And the joke that we had in that session, I remember teaching it, was when I was young, I would see these mansions and I'd say, Mom, look at that beautiful house. And she would say, who's going to clean it? Do you remember that? Who's going to clean it? So anytime I see anything that's like abundant, it's like, who's going to clean it? Like, I don't really want that because it's going to be too much work. But so writing checks to myself, I wrote I remember making, I wrote a check for $100,000 one year, and I just posted it on my board in my room. And I remember, a couple years later, I was making $97,000, and I just tipped over $100,000. I was like, oh my God, this is like so amazing.
If I work this much overtime, it'll be at 100, right?
It's crazy. I mean, that stuff happens to me all the time, but not that drastic. I mean, seriously, it's not that drastic. Sometimes it's just a thought or a vision that I have that just manifests. And again, I do not pretend to be the expert of why law of attraction works. I do know that my attitude does shape my behavior, and my behavior then dictates what I get. So my feelings are part of my attitude. So I can say without a shadow of a doubt that EQ is the law of attraction, because if I'm managing my emotions, I'm managing my behavior. And if I'm managing my behavior, I'm getting the fruits of whatever that behavior is.
Right. Well, I have a comment. I have a really, really cute husband, and He's asking you a question.
Okay.
What keeps you up at night?
Absolutely nothing. Oh my God. I wish something kept me up at night. Sometimes
Yay.
TV, if I'm addicted to a TV show, I have to say I will go there.
So you can regulate that
no,
worry. You're not a ruminator.
you
You
know,
kind of like put it to rest, right?
I am a practitioner of emotional intelligence. And, there was a time in my life that I would get up in the middle of the night. Like I remember those days when I suffered from a lot of social anxiety, just anxiety in general. And I would wake up in the middle of the night all the time. And I remember sharing with my tribe about that. Like, what do I do? And women, I remember my coach saying, put your clock outside of the room. And maybe it's the caffeine, who knows? But I go to bed and I sleep all night. I sleep all night.
Well, I'm really jealous because I'm a worrier. So
it's managing your mind, checking in on those stories. It's managing your mind and checking in on your stories and letting it go.
Catastrophizing, right?
Right. I know. It's all in your mind. It's all in your mind.
So the one thing we always ask people at the closing of our show is, what are you most hopeful about for women in the future?
Oh, the thing I get most excited about is watching women helping women. I remember I had another mentor. She's much older now, but I remember her saying when Sheryl Sandberg's book came out, she handed it to me and she goes, I want you to read this because it's really important work. And I remember her saying to me, in the old days when I was climbing, and she was a COO of a company, big, huge company here in Portland. And she was saying, in my day, women would claw to get to the C-suite and we wouldn't help anyone else. And she said those times are changing, Tracy. And this was way back in like 2004 when I don't know, we know when that book came out. Maybe it was 2006 or 10. And I see that now. I see women rising in companies and being willing to help each other. I don't see so much politicking as I used to. And it's been by all means, it's there. I'm not saying that. And certainly the culture of your organization will dictate that. I feel lucky to be in a corporation now where there's not a lot of politics. Everyone's very kind. I have an amazing boss. I like to think that I'm a supportive boss as well. But it's great to see. It's great to see women helping other women. There's so much we have to do still. Like there's still a lot of work that we have to do to get out of our own way. Like sometimes we talk about the glass ceiling and we talk about the barriers that, men have put in front of us, but a lot of them are our own making.
Right. Sure. Well, and that's the whole point of the show, is that if we share our stories and we're open and authentic, we can grow from one another. We can support one another. Like there's not some big mystery to it, that it's, we're universally all struggling with our messy middle. Right. And so, we might as well be in that muck and murkiness and together, right?
Together. Yes. I so agree. And being courageous together.
So, I feel like an hour went by so quickly.
I know.
I just really loved it. And I'm delighted that you agreed to come on the show. How can people get a hold of you, your seminars, know more about you? I mean, I know you're on LinkedIn.
Seminars. Yes, thank you. ThriveOnSeminars.com. I do webinars every month on a topic. My last one was about how to negotiate more money. It's all about courageous conversations. I do them every month. You can find me on LinkedIn, Dr. Tracy Adams on LinkedIn, to stay connected with me, and go to my website, ThriveOnSeminars.com, and get on my newsletter. I'll do lots of little freebies for training. My whole mission is to help women get their voice in the world. Like I want our voice not in the room, like Sheryl Sandberg would say, in the room, but let's get it in the world.
Yes.
Truly save the world. It's our job to save the world. Really.
Yay. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. I hope you'll keep in touch.
Absolutely.
And I will look forward to another Friday with you. I think I did one of them about defining your worth.
Yes.
So I was on one of those. I really loved it. And so
every week.
I hope to see more of them. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to be on your dating one.
Oh,
So-
yeah, very good. Well, good. Your husband will thank me for that, or thank you for that.
Say
Yeah,
what?
that's great. That's great. Well, but if you know of any single women
Oh, I know.
that need to take this class, it's going
I
to be
know
a really
plenty.
great class.
Yes, I'm
it'll
sure
be my
it's
best
going to
work.
be.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Tracy.
You're
Have a good
welcome.
evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Well, wasn't she delightful? So I am so happy that we've been able to bring you Dr. Tracy Adams tonight. And if there's any questions, anything that you want to know, I hope you'll put it in the comment section in response to the live stream. The audio will be out in 8 to 10 weeks. And thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.